I don't know who organized the program, but it seems that they've done me no favors. Sandwiched me in between Stacey Dean, Ambassador Cousins, and Leslie. Three powerful women. And three women who have had a profound impact on the conversation we're going to have today and that you're all going to be engaged in today. And three women that have helped guide a lot of the policies and initiatives at USDA that I'm going to talk about today. So I'm indebted to all three of them. I can remember, frankly, when I first started this job as Secretary of Agriculture way back when, one of the first people who came into the office to introduce herself was Leslie. And we've been friends ever since, and certainly relied on her and her guidance. Stacey Dean, I can speak for 25 minutes on Stacey Dean, the work that she did at USDA, a real change, a great friend, a tremendous leader, and an imaginative and creative and thoughtful leader who really made a difference at FMI. Forever indebted to her. And Erica goes, oh my God, tone it down. Really morning for me, to have for those of you. But everywhere I go, and I mean, I'm in a lot of different places around the world, she shows up because she is passionate about this issue. She cares about it. She understands the significance of it to folks, and she has been a great champion of the need to transform our food system here in the United States and to transform our system globally to ensure that everybody actually does have access to affordable, nutritious food. So I'm also indebted to her for her friendship. And I'm here today essentially to talk to you about this effort that's underway in this country that I think is incredibly significant and important in terms of bringing our country together. I think food has a tremendous and compelling capacity not only to make a difference in the lives of individuals and communities, but to actually be a unifying force in our country. But I think it does require that we commit ourselves to a serious and substantial and long-term effort to transform the food system that exists in the country today. And I think that there are four essential elements to that transformed system. And my speech today will obviously talk a little bit about retail groceries and the importance of them. But I think it's important to look at this holistically. When you talk about the food system, you have to start with those who grow and raise the food that we consume. And the need for us to be supportive of them to ensure that they can sustainably grow and raise those crops and livestock and produce and food products. And so there's a concerted effort as part of an elevated effort to transform our food system as focusing on sustainably grown and raised food. It is important for us, given our experience recently with the pandemic, to understand that a transformed food system also is one that builds into a greater resiliency. We learned when the pandemic hit, when there was a major disruption in the nation, and this is also true when there's a natural disaster and there's a major disruption in a region or state, that we need to build greater resilience into that system. And that means that we need to make a concerted effort to support and to build out local and regional food systems so that the food that comes to people is coming from closer to them. I think it's also fair to say that a transformed system, as has been stated earlier today, is one that does indeed provide access to nutritious food for all. As I've often said in this job, that we focus on food insecurity as we should in this country, but the reality is that you can be fed but not necessarily fed well. And it is, I think, incumbent on the richest and most powerful nation in the world to figure out a way in which we can do both for everybody, not just for the fortunate few who are financially well off. And finally, as we talk about this issue of food and transformed food systems, we need to make sure that as we're providing access to that nutritious food for all, that we're guaranteeing equity of opportunity. Equity needs to be at the center of what we do and how we do it. So how are we doing at the Department of Agriculture in terms of supporting these four elements of a transformed system? Well, I think we're doing pretty well. We've set a foundation and a strong foundation in all four areas. And I'm going to touch on all four areas quickly. And if I go over my time just a little bit, apologies. But this is really important conversation you're having. First and foremost, I think you need to know that the Department of Agriculture has made a concerted commitment to partner with producers and to partner with food companies and to partner with environmental groups and conservation groups and major retailers and food processing companies and universities and historic Black colleges and minority serving institutions to create what we refer to as the Partnership for Climate Smart Agriculture and Forestry Commodity Initiative. It's an initiative in which we're investing $3 billion across 135 contracts involving over 100 commodities that are grown and raised and every species of livestock in all 50 states, partnering with tens of thousands of farmers across millions of acres of land to encourage them to embrace climate smart practices, nearly 200 of them identified, provided incentives to embrace those practices, and then working with the market to create market incentives and premiums for the products that they are producing. This is designed specifically to begin the process of establishing a more sustainable grown food system in our country. This partnership initiative has become incredibly popular, and it's going to grow over the course of the next several years. And it is part and parcel of a transformed food system. It has the support of major commodity groups. It has the support of major farm organizations. And it is something that just yesterday I had a conversation with major farm leaders, and they are excited about continuing this effort and ensuring that it continues to expand. And so part of the mission of the group here is to be aware of programs like that and to be supportive of programs like that so that indeed, as we talk about future food and farm policy, we incorporate this transformed and the elements of a transformed food system in those discussions. When we come to talk about greater resilience and local and regional food systems, the department has been incredibly engaged in that initiative as well, utilizing the resources of the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the infrastructure law. All of those laws are headlined. All of those laws involve significant resources, but what you may not know is where those resources are going: into a transformed food system. For example, we use resources from those bills to be able to invest in over 500 local processing opportunities, recognizing that our food system today is highly concentrated in terms of processing capacity, offering very few choices to farmers and ranchers and producers to market their products. We began the process of building a platform in which we are investing in local processing, the capacity to have local markets. Over 500 grants, loans, loan guarantees, relending opportunities that are creating a network of processing for meat, poultry, and processed eggs across the country that are now being utilized in a significant number of states to build out the resilience of our food system. We're investing resources today, and it's something that the advocates in this room and the philanthropic organizations in this room need to understand that can be leveraged. We've invested money with commissioners and secretaries and directors of agriculture at the state level, giving them the power to invest literally millions of dollars in their respective states to expand and to make their food system more resilient for a non-meat and poultry processing, for warehousing, for cold storage, for the kinds of infrastructure that you have to think about when you think about a transformed food system. It's not just a grocery store. It's the supply chain that provides to the grocery store. It's the capacity of that grocery store or that supply chain to have cold storage, to have warehousing capacity. And now there are resources provided to secretaries and commissioners of agriculture to invest in those opportunities in every state in the country. And so folks who are engaged in this effort need to know where that money is and how it's being invested. And maybe you have a few ideas about where it could be invested wisely in your community. You need to know that we've established 12 food business centers. These are centers that are, in essence, virtual centers. Many of them are located in universities, but you go on USDA.gov website and you can find out the location and the area, depending on where you're from. These food business centers are now today putting out what are called business builder grants. We provided each of these centers resources to operate for the next 5 years. Again, a substantial amount of money, nearly $420 million going into this system, to be able to provide those centers to create the technical assistance for those who want to establish a regional and food system, and some financial assistance to get that process started. So you need to know about that, and you need to take advantage of that. You need to know that we are in the process now of advertising the availability of what is called local food purchasing agreements. Now, we as the U.S. government buy a lot of food, or we initiate and provide resources to buy a lot of food. And the reality is that we ought to be using some of that purchasing power to link those local and regional food producers to the system that helps to buy food for food banks, helps to buy food for school programs, helps to buy food for food pantries. So now we are providing the opportunity again for millions of dollars at the state level to be able to empower ag secretaries and commissioners and directors to purchase locally, to create that resiliency in a food supply system. So you see, well over nearly $3 billion and counting is being invested in this more resilient food system. Now, providing access to nutritious food for all, that involves two significant elements. One is obvious. You have to be able to have the capacity, the resources, the finances to be able to purchase food. And that's where Stacey D comes into play. She's a really bright person. So she walks into my office one day, early in the administration, and says, would you be interested, Mr. Secretary, if we could increase the purchasing power of the SNAP program? And I said, well, of course I would be interested in doing that. How are you going to convince our friends on the Hill to be able to do that? She said, well, we don't really need to do that because they've already given us the opportunity to increase the purchasing power of the SNAP program. I said, well, how is that? Well, every 5 years, we're supposed to take a look at the Thrifty Food Plan. We're supposed to take a look at that plan and ask ourselves, what does a family that's on the financial edge, what are they actually purchasing? What are they doing in the grocery store? And how much does it cost? And how active are they? And she explained this process. And she said, we really haven't looked at a real family. We really haven't looked at, as we've evaluated this for the last 45 years, we haven't looked at what it actually costs for for a family to have access to food during a month period of time. She said, it'd be interesting if we looked at that, wonder what we would find. And so with assistance and help from the industry, we were able to secure information that basically said, well, gosh, they're purchasing stuff differently than they did 45 years ago. The food purchasing pattern is different. The activity level is different. The cost is certainly different. And this hasn't been adjusted in real terms for 45 years. So she said that if we did that, it would increase SNAP benefits by 21%. And that's exactly what we did. And I will tell you, I think this is important to say to all of you. It isn't when you are in the public life and you're in the public eye and you make decisions like this, and you provide millions and millions of dollars of assistance to families who are struggling, they ought to put a plaque in honor of your name. They ought to elevate you and say thank you, thank you, thank you. But they denied her the opportunity to be the Undersecretary of the Food and Nutrition Service, because they just weren't happy with how she worked. They just didn't like that idea of 21% here. Daisy, forever indebted to you. The guts and the strength, character, and the commitment and the passion to basically take that chance, to take that risk, to suffer that consequence, so that 43 million Americans would have access to more resources So at the end of the month, they could go into Leslie's grocery stores and be able to purchase food for their family. Now, how noble is that? That's the work that you all are doing. That's the work that you're engaged in. That's the work that, if you're a philanthropy that you're supporting, that's the work that, as a retailer, you're making possible. That's the work that, if you're an entrepreneur and trying to figure out how to locate a grocery store or a small corner store to provide opportunity, that's the work you're engaged in. And that level of passion, that level of energy and commitment is what is necessary if we're truly interested in transforming the system. So in addition, so that would be enough. You know, she's like in the my Hall of Fame. She wasn't finished. She said, you know, really, we ought to make that bonus buy and the WIC program permanent so that people can have access to more fruits and vegetables at those grocery stores that Leslie cares about. And so we did that. And she said, well, you know, this is great. We love our school meal program, but you know what? These kids are in the summer, they don't have a school meal program. Now they gotta, you know, they can go to a location and get a meal during the summer, fair enough, but golly, it's kind of tough, especially in rural places, for folks to be able to do that. And we learned through the pandemic that, you know, maybe we have grab and grow kind of programs, and you think maybe we could provide like resources to these families so that they could go to the grocery store during the summer and purchase food for their families and for their children. So as a result of her work and her team's work and the work of both Senators Stabenow and Bozeman, the Sunbucks program was born. A program that provides $40 a month per child, if you're a free and reduced lunch kid, to the families of those children so that they are in a position to go into a grocery store and be able to continue to buy nutritious foods during the summer months. Now, this isn't just an idea that Stacy came up with, in fairness. The folks at FNS have been studying this for 10 years, and they said, hey, you know, this actually works. This actually increases nutrition for kids, and it allows them to have just a little healthier start to that school year. And maybe that will result in them doing a little bit better in school. I mean, this is the link. This is the work you're doing. Just think about this. If you support the summer feeding program, you're supporting a youngster's ability to be at their best when they start school. And if they're at their best when they start school, they're going to do their best at school. And what does that mean? That means a lifetime of productivity and contribution to our country. That's the work that you're engaged in. So this Sunbucks program, pretty important program. Here's the unfortunate thing. You would think, oh gosh, this is terrific. All a state has to do is to agree to pay 50% of the administrative cost of operating this program. How difficult can that be? How expensive can that be? And in exchange, the federal government will provide the resource for the family on a card, and they'll go to the grocery store, and that'll support the grocery store and the jobs and the supply chain and the farmers. What a great linkage. You would think, gosh, every state should do that, right? No, only 35, 36 states at that. So if you need to go online, take a look at the 14 states or so that haven't done this and say, oh, why not? Why wouldn't you do this? If we're truly interested in a transformed food system and truly interested in making sure there's linkage between that system and people who are in need of nutritious food accessible to all, then we got to get those other states on board. So I leave you with that challenge. Now, Earthman's already mentioned the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, and that's the second component of this. You can expand the programs. I mean, you can provide more SNAP benefits. You can do all of that, but if there's not a grocery store, or there's no place for you to go, what do you do? And that's why we have the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, and we basically divided that into three parts. $25 million has been granted under that program for 162 retail stores in 46 states across the country to provide them a bit more capacity to provide a wider array of food products so that nutritious support for all, more equipment, more infrastructure, and providing the financial assistance that's incredibly necessary in order to make it all work. $40 million was then provided to 16 public-private partnerships. And you need to know about this because these local and regional healthy food financing partnerships are essentially efforts to provide ongoing and consistent and permanent credit availability for retail stores that are interested in locating or expanding in areas that have been food deserts or that lack capacity. So this is expanding access in 20 states to financing options. And then, as the ambassador indicated, we just recently announced the availability of $60 million under the Food Access Retail Expansion Program. And as she indicated, it's grants and loans and technical assistance to expand retail capacity. Now, these are important commitments, but by no means enough. By no means enough. And so it's going to be important and necessary for those of us who are interested in food system transformation to continue to encourage our policymakers to look at the need and the benefit of this system of food system transformation. The benefit to farmers, the benefit to communities, the benefit to families. So resources are there. Resources will continue to be there for a number of years, but obviously they need to be expanded significantly. Now, in terms of equity, I'm just going to touch on that very briefly. We've made a concerted effort, whether it's expanding access to culturally sensitive and appropriate foods in our school program, or creating an indigenous food sovereignty initiative, or providing resources for processing for indigenous foods. We have been very sensitive to the need and the understanding that one size does not fit all when we talk about food system transformation. And that it's important and necessary for us to recognize that and to invest in that system. Now, I've got Emily's one of my great advanced people. She puts up a sign for me and she says, "You got 3 minutes left." So she just put a sign up 3 minutes ago that said I had 5 minutes, and now she just put up 2 fingers. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes. This is really, really, really important. We can do all of that. We can do all of it. And it still wouldn't be enough. And here's why. There is a tendency to think, particularly in rural areas, that if we just had a grocery store, if we just had broadband, that somehow magically the rural economy would change and be revitalized and communities would be great. No, we've got to figure out a way to make farming and ranching profitable for everybody. I'm going to give you some statistics here that are important for you to know, because this is what you're facing in rural places. You're facing an economy that doesn't take full advantage of the natural resource base that it has. We have commoditized our agriculture in this country, and as a result of that, we are essentially saying to farmers, produce a commodity, understand that that commodity has a very small profit margin, if any, at any point in time. So that means you have to grow a lot of it. To grow a lot of it, you have to be a very large farming operation. And that is, in fact, what has happened over the course of the last 30 or 40, 50 years. We've lost hundreds of thousands of farms. Now, when we lose farms, we lose farm families. When we lose farm families, we lose the extended family. They leave and they go into an urban center. They leave and go into a suburb. They leave that rural community. That means there's fewer and fewer people, and it makes it harder for Leslie and her organization and organizations that represent grocery stores to justify the location of a grocery store when the population is constrained. So what we need to do is we need to have an initiative that understands we need to build back that rural economy. We need to revitalize it. And the way we do this is by saying to farms and farmers, there's another way to do this. If you have the capacity to be big, great, terrific. Look, you're going to feed the world. But if you can't do that, then we have to give you the ability to go beyond just getting a check for your crops or your livestock. We've got to figure out a way in which that farm itself works harder. 88% of American farm families work off the farm in order to be able to keep the farm. 88%. The top 10% of farms in this country represent those who sell more than $350,000 in sales every year. That's 180,000 farms. They get 85% of the income that's generated every year. That means 15% of that income is divided among 1.7 million farm families. And the reality is nearly 50% of those families don't make any money from their farming operation. The other 40% have to have that off-farm income to keep the farm. So the question is, why is it the farm family has to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs? Why can't the farm itself generate more than one source of income? And that's where climate smart agriculture comes into play, because it's not just about getting a benefit to embrace conservation practices. It's not just about a premium in the marketplace. It's also about being able to measure, quantify, and verify the environmental results of your practices so that you can, in fact, be paid by those who are developing ecosystem service markets to generate that environmental result. That becomes a new income source. You can embrace renewable energy for your own operation, but you can also potentially produce excess renewable energy, and you can sell that to the local REC. That's another revenue source. You can take a look at that agricultural waste, particularly your livestock operation, where in fact we have probably been over applying it on some of our land, creating serious issues with water quality. Instead of diverting it into a processing and manufacturing facility located down the road, converting it into anything from sustainable aviation fuel to a multitude of bio-based products, creating yet another source of income and jobs in rural communities. We can support that local and regional food system that gives that farmer a better deal in the food system, because every time you go to a major grocery store and you slap your dollar down on the counter, that farmer gets any given year 20 cents of that food dollar. But if you are selling it directly to your local school, or you're working with your retailer and you're selling it to that retailer, and that retailer is marketing it as something that's locally and regionally produced, that farmer gets 50 to 70 cents of that dollar. We create a system and a structure that provides the economic incentive for that farm family to stay in that community, to continue to grow in that community, to have their family stay in that community, to have the kids support the school in that community, to have people be able to shop at the local business owned and operated by a small business owner who lives, works, and raises their family in that community, and we can have sufficient support so the healthcare system doesn't have to beg, borrow, and steal to try to get a doctor for healthcare. And in doing that, we can revitalize the rural economy, we can repopulate rural places, we can take pressure off our urban centers, we can create the population centers necessary to support a full-scale grocery store. We can have incomes that generate enough resource so that people do in fact have access to nutritious food and can afford it. And as a country, we can continue to meet our military needs, because you see a disproportionate number of those who service in the military come from those rural communities. If you shrink the rural population, you shrink the capacity of this country to defend itself. That's your work. That's what you're engaged in. Think about this. Think about the magnitude, think about the scope, think about the connections of a food system transformation effort. And if that doesn't get you up in the morning, Earthman cousins will come to your house and wake you up. Thank you all very much.
Well, good morning. Wow. He was worried about following the women. What an act to follow. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. He was awesome. I am delighted to be with all of you today. I am especially pleased to be part of this grocery summit and to be working with Earthman and the group here at GW to be able to talk about some of these issues that the Secretary has laid out so beautifully for us. You know, I think the way I'll start this morning is to talk to you a little bit about the grocery industry. I know that many of you are very familiar with how we function and what our role is in our communities, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how we feel about our communities and how we feel about what we do. I think it's fair to say that from the very beginning, the food industry understood very well that food and people go together. So wherever there are people gathered, there's likely to be food. And wherever there's food, at some point, there's going to be people too, because that's just the way we function. And so whether you think of the food supply as fuel for the body or consider it an artistry that feeds the soul, food remains at the very heart of the human experience. For years, FMI's tagline has been feeding families and enriching lives. That phrase captures the dual focus of the grocery world. We may sell food, but we also serve people. Grocers call them by lots of different names, whether we call them shoppers or customers or consumers or guests. But food retailers maintain a mutual emphasis on the products they sell and the desires, needs, preferences and shopping styles of the people they serve every day in their stores. Now, we may not be certain the customer is always 100% right, but we're very sure they're never wrong. And that's why the grocery industry is very big on providing options to cater to every taste and every preference that exists in the communities we serve. As many of you know, the average grocery store carries more than 40,000 SKUs, and that's grocery items in their stores. Basically, so they can accommodate the diverse preferences and shifting taste demands of an ever-changing population. Groceries take their community service quite seriously. They consider it a part of what it means to be in the noble enterprise of food retailing. This is so true that a few years ago, we sought to create a community uplift awards program at FMI, but we really struggled to get our members to talk about what they were doing in their communities. The leading response when we asked why they wouldn't share this information with us was, this is part of who we are and what we do. We don't expect to get an award for it. So we've worked with them and we're able now to get some of that information out of them, but it's clear that they view this as a part of who they are and what they do. Now, as you might imagine, in the highly competitive landscape of food retail, each business is looking for that differentiator, the thing that makes them different, the secret sauce that helps them become different than the retailer down the street. Recently, in a survey conducted annually regarding our members' business practices, we asked them to list their differentiation strategies. The first place to answer, and one of the most successful strategies, is community support and community ties. And if you look at the other top differentiators, which include online shopping, curbside pickup, personalized customer service, and the list goes on, almost every single one of them has a keeping the customer satisfied and happy aspect to it. Customer service is where they want to stand out. So food retailers see their role as feeding families and enriching lives, and they take that mission seriously. But they're also aware that their job is to run a sustainable business. To survive and thrive over time, stores must make a profit. But it says something about the values of the grocery industry to learn that the profit margin for the average grocery store over the last 40 plus years has been between 1 and 2% per year. 1.6% to be precise for last year. Grocers operate on a pennies on the dollar profit margin, which explains why they're such a cautious lot. They can't afford to make risky changes because they simply do not have the luxury of making a costly mistake. I think it's also why food retailers were so personally offended by the inflation-fueled media attacks accusing them of price gouging. And I don't mind telling you, as their representative, I was pretty offended by it as well. And if you need further proof of where retailers' hearts are, we asked our members, does your company have quantified goals and implementation timeframes for various social responsibility commitments? Here are their answers. 95% said they had definitive plans for charitable contributions. 91% reported clear commitments to community outreach programs. 74% are committed to diversity in hiring, and 71% have made commitments to reduce energy usage. Now, I appreciate you allowing me to spend part of my time this morning touting the virtues of the industry I have the good fortune to work for and work with. But I thought it was necessary for you to have that bit of background about how we feel in the grocery industry about what we do every day as a framework for the discussion that's going to happen for the rest of the day. I know we're all here to talk about enriching access to healthier food for all Americans. Many of us in this room have the luxury of choosing from multiple grocery stores and a mix of channels. At FMI, we are acutely aware that not everyone has that luxury. We're also aware, because our friends at FRAC and other such important organizations remind us, that food insecurity remains a grave issue for about 1 in 7 households in America, especially among Black and Latino populations, and particularly in the South, where I come from. The dual issues of accessibility and affordability are not strangers to the food industry. The truth is, the grocery industry would like nothing better than to have a brick and mortar store on every corner in every community of every state. We love what we do, and we'd like nothing more to do more of it. However, as I've said, food retail is a business, and a store must be economically viable to succeed over time. And you and I both know the penetration that I suggested just a second ago is not feasible. It's not possible for us to expand our thinking beyond 75,000 square foot brick and mortar stores solutions to explore new answers to the issue of better serving underserved areas. We're experimenting with smaller footprints, limited assortment stores in both rural and urban settings, but we think online ordering and grocery delivery shows the most promise. As were many of you in this room, FMI was an active participant in the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health convened just a few years ago. As a result of our participation, FMI members made a commitment to reach 100 million consumers with evidence-based nutrition messages, a goal we exceeded in 2023 and have already exceeded in 2024. For instance, each September, FMI hosts National Family Meals Month, when our members urge their customers to have more meals at home with family, however the term family is being defined. We tout science-based facts about the many benefits of family meals, one of which is that they tend to be healthier, largely due to the increased presence of fruits and vegetables and portion control. And we know from Harris Poll data that the Family Meals Month campaign successfully reaches more than 103 million Americans. In both 2023 and 2024, 31% of the population reported seeing our members' messaging and family meals promotions, which encourage nutrition awareness and the increased consumption of fruits and vegetables. We partner with MyPlate, which has adapted some of the family meal infographics to help promote dietary guidance, appropriate health and well-being messaging, and many of our stores catering to SNAP and WIC customers have special family meal menu guidance available to direct those customers to afford family meal choices. Stores with retail registered dietitians provide healthy eating solutions, shopping guidance, and even nutrition counseling to help address nutrition issues and food security. Their work in seeking to improve overall health and assist with disease prevention and management is a cornerstone of the food as medicine movement. But that wasn't all we committed to. Additionally, FMI members committed to donating 2 billion meals to support nourishing communities in 2023, and we continued that push in 2024. We accomplished this through myriad methods, ranging from collecting donations from customers at the point of sale, which contributes to our being the top donation stream to Feeding America, to grants to support local food banks and feeding agencies, such as Meals on Wheels America. And the list goes on and on of the things that we're doing in food retail to try to help in this space. We have a number of examples that are available in our collective report to the White House Conference. We have page after page after page of examples demonstrating the way food retailers are acting locally to serve their neighborhoods and reach the goal of 2 billion meals served. And this goal is particularly important since not every community can support a football field-sized grocery store. As our collective presence here today proves, there's more to be done, and we heard it very clearly from the Secretary to achieve our healthy food access and affordability. The industry is working diligently on ways to better and more efficiently get healthy food into the hands and mouths of their customers. In fact, you may remember that delivery of online orders was number 6 on the list of differentiators it's working on, with 2/3 of retailers feeling more successful in their attempts. The instigation of online SNAP benefits is a move in the right direction toward improving food access and will get better with time. According to USDA studies, the share of households using online purchasing is growing, although there are differences between rural engagement and urban engagement. While both situations favor online orders fulfilled by pickup rather than delivery, rural users prefer it almost 70% of the time, while urban dwellers just 38% of the time. The reason for this is simple. SNAP benefits cannot be used to pay delivery fees or membership fees, so it's an out-of-pocket expense for SNAP recipients. This is an evolving and improving realm, but one that I think has distinct possibility. And for those who still think having brick and mortar stores in underserved areas is the favored access solution, from work we've done at FMI in this area, we know there are notable obstacles that simply must be addressed, such as, to the Secretary's point, is there an adequate demographic base to support a store? How will the timing of SNAP benefit distribution impact success? And is there adequate space for parking and loading docks, particularly in urban areas? Additionally, there are two more obstacles to expanding store locations into underserved areas that I want to highlight. The first is higher insurance and security costs. In our research with our members, we ask about the issues that keep them awake at night. The two that surface with high negative scores and no redeeming positive scores are societal changes such as lack of civility, drugs, violence, and theft or fraud, which our industry refers to as shrink. These issues weigh heavily on food retailers' minds, especially since they also impact the safety and security of the associates who work in their stores. When exploring new store locations, these factors loom large in terms of higher insurance costs and daunting security expenses. Another barrier to expanding into underserved areas is recruitment and training of store employees. Most grocery stores want their staff to reflect the demographic makeup of the community they serve. In areas where chronic high unemployment rates exist, the cost of recruiting and retaining reliable workers increases, further complicating an already difficult workforce issue. Other obstacles, some regulatory in nature, exist, but I trust these will be discussed as we listen to the panel discussions throughout the course of the day. So I leave you with the reminder that food retailers got into this business because they like people and they enjoy selling food. They face challenges every single day in their businesses, so they aren't afraid of tackling tough issues, but they don't like facing them alone or being blamed for problems they didn't create. They're willing to listen to promising ideas, but new considerations can't be too risky, too costly, or fail the long-term sustainability test. The leaders of the industry believe in fruitful partnerships, strive on collaboration, and want to do everything they can to make life easier for the communities they serve. And as social media makes us all neighbors, food retailers are not afraid of seeing expansion in the borders and boundaries of their communities. I'm delighted to have had a few minutes with you today. Thank you for having me. I look forward to seeing and hearing where the results of this conversation take us all as we work together to address this serious issue in our society. Thank you very much.